Chapter 181. Halt the Convoy. The mortar teams moved into position, and Dominic jogged to the cliff, revealing himself to the convoy. "Halt the convoy! Don't make this difficult when we're feeling peaceable," he shouted. The escorts drew their blades, and Dominic heard the mortar teams complaining about losing the advantage of surprise. But the convoy stopped. Out of the ornate steam-powered transport that the princess had identified as belonging to Viscount Boscombe, a dark-haired man emerged to glare up at Dominic. "What is the meaning of this? Are mere border guards turning on their rightful king?" he demanded. "Viscount Boscombe? Or perhaps King Boscombe now?" Dominic asked, confirming his suspicions. "That is me. Who are you to stop my convoy?" "My apologies, Your Majesty. I am Royal Sorcerer Dominic Wavemates of Signia, and I am afraid that your presence will be required for a meeting here before we can allow your convoy to depart back west." Dominic replied. "Back to the west?" the Viscount asked. "Part of what we need to discuss. You see, as of now, everything east of the Skiptondle River is under the control of the Signia Royal Army, or will be within the next few days." Dominic explained. He wasn't sure that it was true, but all the major cities were, and the smaller ones should be soon. They hadn't seen a Dago's airship since they got here. "And what if I do not come peacefully?" the Viscount asked. "I have 500 Magitech light cannons in the gorge. I suspect that you can be persuaded to act reasonably." With that, the front rank of mortars rose to their feet, showing off the brass tubes on their shoulders. The soldiers looked along the lines, knowing that even if they drew their bows now, cannon fire would tear them apart before the arrows even reached the cliffs. "Do you even have the authority to negotiate with me?" Viscount Boscombe asked. "I am a royal advisor, and I have someone here who will more than qualify as a royal negotiator." Dominic agreed. One of the regimental officers ran out a rope ladder to let the Viscount scale the cliff, and Princess Alexis moved to stand next to Dominic, but didn't speak. The Viscount recognized her immediately, even with her hair dyed black, and headed for the cliff with a group of his guard behind him. The regiment moved back, so they wouldn't be taken as a threat to the Viscount, especially if he was already confirmed as the new king of Dagos. Dominic extended his hand to help the nobleman to his feet at the top of the cliff, then his guards as well. Someone brought forward camp chairs, but the Viscount shook his head. "We can retire to your camp to discuss. I trust Her Highness not to have me assassinated at this point," he insisted. Alexis shrugged. The Viscount was happily married, and he had never struck her as a creep. There was no harm in letting him sit in the camp as they talked. The princess led them to an empty set of seats around a cooking fire, still burning low from the afternoon meal. "Forgive the informality. This setup has proven to be more comfortable than the standard arrangement. First, for the sake of formality, have you officially taken the throne?" Princess Alexis asked. Viscount Boscombe shook his head. "Not yet. The official transfer of title ceremony was supposed to be in the next week after I led the relief of Pickleshauen. You weren't far off when you said that everything east of the river is controlled by Signia. Except for the villages and rural areas, that is." Princess Alexis frowned. "Don't you know? There are no villages left. When we passed through, everyone had either starved, been taken by force for the military recruitment, or fled. The villages all the way to the Tun River, over 500 kilometers, are empty." Boscombe didn't look convinced, but his intense scrutiny didn't shake the princess. "And what sort of discussion might you have called me up here for? I would assume that you're not going to demand the surrender of Dagos," the Viscount asked. Princess Alexis smiled at him. "No, I think that we can come up with something much more amenable than that. Did you know that Signia has Magitech to operate irrigation systems? A large portion of Dagos has fallen to drought even before the war started, but the technology exists to make those fields viable again. It might not be cheap, and Dagos is certainly going to be deep in debt after the war finishes, but if you can stabilize the throne and bring an end to the war, I can guarantee a favorable armistice agreement. Realistically, you've only got 2 months left anyhow. Once the east falls, the airships will begin to firebomb the northern regions of Dagos, until there isn't a single farmer or field left in the country to feed the cities. You look like a reasonable man to me, which is why we're willing to let you turn around and take care of business. If it was Prince Kaizen in the carriage, there would not have been a discussion at all. She informed the Viscount, her tone turning dry at the mention of the prince. Viscount Boscombe sighed. That man holds too much influence with the army to easily displace him. But the nobles are turning on him with every day that passes and every city that falls. Deposing the bastard prince who controls the armies will not be a fast process. I long ago stepped away from royal duties in favor of a love marriage into the Viscount Boscombe's family. So long ago now that even some of my own children have been casualties of the war. Dominic nodded in understanding. He had been the one to kill the Viscount's son at the airship docks in Burton. The Viscount got a wistful look on his face and then addressed Dominic instead of Princess Alexis. It would be uncouth to ask the princess directly, but if I should fail, what is the plan? Dominic smiled. The Viscount should already know, but he wanted someone to tell him again, just to hear the words. If you should fail, and the successor to the throne should be deemed unsuitable, the largest group of nobles in Signia are pushing to have the Crown Prince of Signia and his bride installed as the Queen and Prince Consort of Dagos, annexing the nation and making it a secondary title of the Signia crown when the Crown Prince ascends the throne. Dominic insisted. Princess Alexis was glad that nobody was looking at her at that moment because her shock at his plan would have ruined the ruse. Annexing Dagos? The nation was massive, over twice the land mass and 4 times the population of Signia. That level of political shift would cause unrest all over the continent. Dominic noticed her unease and smiled at the Viscount. I am sure that it wouldn't go over smoothly, but West Kyria has long been interested in some eastern territories, while Axbridge has shown interest in the Kaiwan province. Even with those sacrifices, Signia would triple in land and population, under one royal family sharing the bloodline of both nations. Chapter 182. Turn back, Your Highness. Viscount Boscombe tilted his head, seriously considering the options. Passing the nation to one of the Signia Crown Prince's sons with a Signia-appointed regent was the solution that I had thought would be most likely, as they are considered imperial princes of both nations by blood. If Dagos considered women to be in the direct line of succession, your Crown Prince's wife would be the Crown Princess already. However, as a loyal son of Dagos and his heirs, neither of those options would be my first choice. I will arrange for the throne to be secured, even if it means that I am not the one to claim it. Dominic nodded. Thank you. But know this. Until you do, we don't have the sway to stop the counterattacks. As much as we would wish for you to succeed, you do have a limited amount of time. The Viscount got to his feet. I should depart now. It will give you time to relocate. Dominic nodded, then shrugged. Or we could stay here and see who still comes down the road, knowing that we're waiting for them. Dominic heard the Dagos guards snort in amusement. The sorcerer had a point. They had hundreds of those Magitech cannons along the ridges, and this was the only major bridge across the river for 50 kilometers. If they relocated, it would actually be doing the Dagos army a favor by clearing the path for reinforcements. But if they stayed and then destroyed the bridge when they encountered a force they couldn't handle, they could delay reinforcements to Peikelschauen and the other cities in the region by nearly a day. The real question was whether the region could afford the delay. The barons Winchfield and Macker both had their homes north of there, along the ocean. But neither was heavily defended, as they were formerly fishing villages that had been swelled by the sudden influx of migrants from inland. Neither would put up a fight against an airship invasion. The Viscount could only hope that he was fast enough to prevent even more tragedy. The channel between Winchfield and Modbury was only 80 kilometers, nothing for an airship, despite the formidable naval defenses stationed there. Modbury was over 250,000 souls, and not once in the history of Dagos after unification had it been invaded. It was simply too inaccessible to any enemy army, at least until now. Viscount Boscombe looked to the sky as he straightened his coat. If I am successful, I will be infamous as the king who lost more of Dagos than any other in history. If I am not, I will be the man who failed Dagos in her moment of need and let a mad prince tear the country down around him. Perhaps there might have been a chance at redemption if I could have retaken the Eastern Territories. But not now. He sighed. Dominic clasped his forearm in the traditional Wavemates soldier's handshake. We sent more artillery than you brought soldiers, and more riflemen than we brought artillery. Winning was never your destiny. Go save your country. The Signia crown is honorable. They will stand behind the princess's promise. The Viscount laughed, a real honest laugh, and returned the gesture. To think that one day a notorious war criminal would be shaking my hand and wishing me luck in gaining the throne. I'm not sure how to feel about that. But if your princess keeps her word, I will extend a royal pardon to you, Lord Sorcerer, as her advisor, in exchange for your efforts. However, I don't think that the army will forget about the massacre at Westover Manor quite so easily. Be careful, Lord Sorcerer. You seem like a decent man, all things considered. The Viscount and his advisors climbed back down the ladder, and the riflemen rolled it back up as the Dago's army turned their trucks around in the gorge and returned to wherever they had come from. Most likely they had come from Albrol City, as it was on the highway between Boscombe and their location, and it was the unofficial capital as the largest city in Dagos. Once the last of the soldiers crossed the river, Princess Alexis turned to Dominic. We need to hear the story of Westover Manor. That is your hometown, right? I had assumed that they called you a war criminal because you are a Wavemates prince, but it doesn't feel like it's that impersonal. She demanded. In a gentle tone, yes, but it was clearly a demand for answers. Dominic nodded, and motioned for the princess and the other nearby officers to take a seat. If I'm going to tell the whole story, you might as well all hear it clearly instead of eavesdropping. I will warn you that there are gaps in my memory. But there are also a few things that I should show you first, so that it all makes sense. Dominic paused, and then focused on the rage he felt the moment that he realized the Dago soldiers had slaughtered everyone in the village. He felt his fingernails grow back out to the full-length black claws he used to keep sharpened as a child, to make it easier to climb trees. Then, his jaw shifted a little as his teeth shifted into the conical fangs of a dragon's maw. Your eyes are glowing gold. Alexis gasped. Dominic shrugged. It happens when I use too much mana as well. In fact, it happens to most mages, but usually blue or purple. He drew back his lips to show his teeth and held up his hand to show his claws. Young dragonkin can't fully control their bestial aspects, or understand why they need to hide the parts of themselves that make playing more fun. On the day that Dagos invaded Wavemates, I was out in the forest, playing with the huntsman's dogs and searching for materials my mother needed for her work. The magical resources of the forest are excellent for making magical items, you see. Because of that, I didn't hear the soldiers coming. I didn't even notice when the huntsmen called their dogs back. I was too busy with my tasks for the day. So, I will start the story with the moment that I got back to the village. Dominic took a deep, steadying breath. This wasn't going to be easy, and he had locked away most of these memories long ago. Chapter 183, When Wavemates Fell. Dominic was lost in memories of the worst day of his life for a long moment, then continued. The first thing that I saw was the smoke. So much smoke. Then the Dago's uniforms coming out of a burning house. They were throwing the bodies in the street as they cleared the village. They weren't even sparing the children. The next thing that I remember, I was on a Dago soldier. Dragon claws tear through flesh like tearing soft bread, you see. He wasn't shocked, even at the last moment. There was nothing but hate in his eyes. I took his short sword and chased another soldier into a house. I used to idolize the manor guards. I watched them every afternoon during training and memorized their sword drills, practicing with a stick for a blade. Half the village kids did. Dominic realized that he was delaying and focused on the story. The sounds of burning houses and soldiers looting drowned out any sound that soft leather boots made on the floor, and the second man never even saw me coming. I don't know why, but I tore his throat out with my claws. I never did use that sword. I've still got it, and it's never been used since. When I came out, someone had found the first body, and the soldiers were gathered in the town square. They saw me right away, but they were standing in a defensive circle. I screamed at them, and it turned into a gout of dragon fire, the first time I ever used the ability in my life. An entire unit died there. After that, I hunted through the woodsmen's houses and the small farms around town, and found dozens more soldiers, but no survivors. My house was empty, and I took the few valuables that we had. I couldn't let the soldiers have it, and my parents weren't there. I found their bodies at my uncle's manor, along with the manor guards and all the extended family. The Dago's invaders had dragged them into the yard, tied them to poles, and burned the women to death. Someone must have stopped them because the fires had been put out, and the last few died to swords. There were so many bodies there. 1,000 more? I don't know. I never counted them. More soldiers showed up while I was checking the manor for survivors, and they began looting the bodies. Something in me snapped, seeing them being so callous to the dead, and I don't remember the next part, just that I bit someone's hand off with the most beautiful ruby bracelet held in it. I've got that too. It's a bit damaged, but I'm saving it for the day that I find a relative of the Earl's wife. Dominic stopped to take a drink and wet his mouth, while the princess and the soldiers shared horrified looks. How old would you have been then? I was still doing basic education with Governess Camilla when Wavemates fell. Alexis asked, her eyes wet with tears. Dominic counted back. I turned 10 just before the attack. A bit small for 10 years old, but dragonkin are like that. We mature slowly and live long lives. Or so my mother used to say. But I don't remember anything after biting that soldier's hand. I am certain that days passed before my mind was clear again. But the next thing that I remember, it was dawn, and I was sleeping in the forest, covered in blood and surrounded by a mountain of soldiers' bodies. Berserk, one of the soldiers whispered. The others nodded, and Princess Alexis frowned. Do you know exactly how long after the attack that was? She asked, treating him with the cautious care that one would give a wounded animal. Dominic smiled at her, trying to assure the princess that he had come to terms with the past. Not more than 2 or 3 days. There were still more Dago soldiers moving through the area or sitting in villages waiting for orders. Once I realized there was nothing left to go back to, I went to my home and loaded what I could into my storage cube. The soldiers destroyed all the magitech in the village when they attacked. I'm not sure why. Even now, Dagos needs it. After that, I went west into Axbridge. It's 700 kilometers west down the river, and then through the jungle. Every soldier I saw I killed, as long as they were in a unit smaller than 10. If they were in a larger unit, I avoided them, unless they were sleeping in a house that I could burn down with them in it. I had always assumed that was the reason that Dagos called me a war criminal. For all of their despicable tactics, they still get upset when someone targets their camps in the night. The regiment's head cook stopped Dominic there. Wait, you're saying that at 10 years old you crossed an entire country, killing an unknown number of Dago soldiers while they slept, and managed to make it out of the country? Why didn't you just come south? You were already at the Signia border, he asked. Signia was an ally of Dagos until the start of this war. Officially, they didn't accept any refugees, and they would have turned me over to Dagos if I was caught. Over time, they stopped enforcing the policy, and by the time I came back last year, nobody cared anymore. Dominic replied with a shrug, then muttered under his breath. It's not an unknown number. It's 1,870 asleep, 304 awake. At least the ones that I remember. Though it was a bare whisper, the camp was so quiet that those sitting around him heard it anyhow. The soldiers of Dagos were not wrong to fear feral dragonkin. Dominic alone probably had a higher kill count than most military regiments had before the war started. The head cook chuckled. Well, at least we know that their accusations aren't slandering you. They're just the complaints of the winners of a Pyrrhic victory. But it does explain how you went from minor royal to apprentice of a toolsmith in the commoner district. Nobody would have thought to look for you there. Dominic chuckled. And now I think that I've terrified my fiancée. Well, we've got time for me to rebuild my reputation and public image. None of the other young noblemen here are going to try to steal her heart away. At least not after learning that Dominic really was the sort of man who wouldn't hesitate to eliminate threats or even stack bodies to send a message. The whole camp seemed to freeze in time, waiting for Princess Alexis to respond to Dominic's public claim. But Alexis was just smirking at him. You really do need a makeover. Your character lore doesn't match your fashion sense. She finally replied. Dominic laughed. I've got some gold chains and I have a forge to make a scimitar. Perhaps someone can dig up a tricorn hat. The princess giggled. While the reformed pirate turned scoundrel prince is a good storyline, I still don't think it quite matches. Too naval for someone from a landlocked country. Chapter 184. Merchant Caravan. That broke the tension in the camp, and the unit's leaders on this side of the gorge spread back out to check on their teams. None of them were actually expecting trouble. So when a convoy of 4 Magitech trucks pulling trailers and flying the West Kyria Naval Standard crossed the river just before dark, everyone was shocked. Roll out a ladder. I will go down and stop them to see if it really is an international merchant. Dominic insisted. And if they are? The soldier with the ladder asked. Then that depends on their answers. We're not at war with West Kyria. But if they're moving military supplies, they're not leaving with them. Dominic replied. Dominic stepped into the road just in time for the first truck in the convoy to apply the brakes. If they had wanted to, they weren't idiots, and they knew that this was most likely an ambush. So, when they hit the area barrier that Dominic had raised, they were still doing close to 30 kilometers an hour, and the occupants of the first truck were tossed up against the windshield. Son of a bitch. That hurt. What the hell did we hit? The driver demanded. Magical barrier. Welcome to the Skiptondal River crossing. My band of merry men is looking for a particular war criminal and his associates. You wouldn't be harboring or supplying them, would you? Dominic asked as the other trucks came to a screeching halt. Steam hissed as pressure valves were released to stop the trucks further back down the line, and shouts of alarm were raised as the mortar teams appeared along the ridgelines. The driver of the first truck held a cloth to his head, slowing the bleeding, and glared at Dominic, who signaled at him in the Trade Guild's hand language, which was the same as the Wavemates' military signals. We're looking for Prince Kaizan and his military leaders. We won't let military supplies pass. The driver blinked slowly, then gestured back. We have a guild transit pass. Dominic shrugged. Don't care. If he's here, he dies. No war supplies go east of the river until he is dead. We're moving textiles from Skipple to Chip. The driver replied. That meant they had to cross Dagos and West Kyria, or go by sea, as Chip was northeast of West Kyria, along the shore. However, if they had set out from Skipple on this route, they had most likely left weeks ago, and at the time there was no war within Dagos' borders, only the invasion of Signia. Dominic nodded. Open the doors. I am checking for compliance with the pass. No offense intended, but we've dealt with enough traitors lately. Dominic insisted, loud enough for his men and the other drivers to hear him. The drivers' responses were mostly annoyed, but the presence of the mortar teams told them that Dominic wasn't asking. One cargo box at a time, Dominic checked the supplies and found that the merchants were honest about their cargo. There wasn't a single weapon, military uniform, or a bit of magitech anywhere to be found. He even sniffed for hidden magic in the vehicles. But, unless the contraband goods were hidden next to the steam boiler furnace, there was no more magic on the vehicles either. Go ahead. The vehicles are clean. Dominic announced, raising his voice so the regiment could hear him. Then he signaled to the driver closest to him. Everything east of here is either under siege or under the control of the Signia army. Best of luck making your destination. You might want to go the long way. The driver passed the message to the front of the convoy, and they made their way up out of the canyon. Brilliant plan, sir. The military convoy in the distance just watched them leave the valley, and they're headed our way now. The scouts reported when Dominic got back up the cliff. Convoy? Surely, not the Viscount again? Dominic asked. The scout shook his head. No, sir. They are newly arrived. A full regiment. A proper infantry regiment, that is. Close to 5,000 men. Dominic sighed. I believe that the princess will agree that if they're dumb enough to try to push across the bridge, we can deal with them in the canyon. They must know that we're here now, as we stopped the merchants. So, they're going to come across at full battle readiness. Try not to blow the bridge if possible. But there's no need to let them engage our men just to let the bridge survive. Once the canyon was clear, the unit began moving forward in lockstep, a perfect military march leading with infantry, and the supply vehicles at the rear of the convoy. When they reached the bridge, Dominic extended an area barrier over the gap between the cliff faces, intended to block archers from firing up into the mortar teams. But the soldiers didn't stop, and Dominic began to have real concerns about their mental health. In fact, they marched all the way into the canyon, then sounded a whistle and turned to face both sides of the ambush. "Deploy anti-magic shell," the commander shouted through a bullhorn. "Morons," Dominic muttered. "Mortars. Fire." Explosions rocked the canyon and extended down the road the last 50 meters to the bridge, where the first of the supply trucks was parked, waiting for what they thought would be a slaughter to end. Technically, they weren't wrong. It was a slaughter, but mortars weren't a magical device. At least not once the ammunition was created. An anti-magic zone would have no effect on them. Princess Alexis shook her head in dismay and looked down at the aftermath of the massacre. 3 volleys. That was all it had taken. They could have probably stopped after 2, and finished with rifles if there were any survivors. Why don't they learn? She pleaded with nobody in particular, disgusted by the waste of life. Dominic wrapped an arm around her shoulder, and the regimental quartermaster gave a rueful sigh before speaking. "Did you see their determination? They knew that the war was lost already. They didn't come here to win. They came here to redeem themselves or die with dignity." Princess Alexis frowned at the young nobleman. She had never thought of it that way. They didn't know what was happening to the west of them, only what they had seen to the east. If things were just as bad in the rest of the nation, it wouldn't be any surprise if the soldiers saw their only options as victory or death. The peasantry of this portion of Dagos had mostly died before the war even started. Chapter 185. Clear the battlefield. The soldiers went about the grim task of cleaning the battlefield, and found that the supply trucks they had sent were completely empty, save for a few weeks' worth of military-issue rations. This unit had not brought anything with them. Not tents, not a camp kitchen. Nothing. So, the vehicles were loaded with bodies, and then the natural sons pulled them off the road and into a clearing where they could have firewood stacked around them to make a proper funeral pyre for the casualties of the battles in the gorge. The fires burned bright all night long, while Dominic restocked the munitions for the mortar teams. 10 more for everyone. That was what he could do in the course of an evening before it got too dark, Dominic discovered. It was a lot of mortars, even when he was making them a bundle at a time, the way that cannonballs were made. He still wouldn't say that all of the soldiers were amply supplied. But they should have had a few left from the previous round of supplies to go with the new batch. The next morning brought silence to the camp. The fires burned low, and no more convoys were spotted along the road. Either Dagos had given up on reinforcing their troops to the east, or they had been sent to the next bridge south, avoiding the ambush location. It gave them all time to rest, clean their gear, get proper meals, and mentally prepare themselves for whatever was going to happen next. Then the situation changed. Incoming military unit from the east. It appears to be one of ours. Scouts have spotted airships. The runner informed Dominic and Alexis as they were finishing dinner. "Send a runner to make contact. If they are our soldiers, I don't want any misunderstandings. We don't have a functional radio with us to contact the airships," Princess Alexis ordered. That was a minor oversight on their part. They had left in a hurry and hadn't thought to get a portable one for the regiment. There were receivers in the trucks, but not transmitters. Again, an oversight of design, and one that both Dominic and the princess would recommend be remedied the moment that they returned home after the war. The runner returned after nearly 2 hours, and came with an officer of the 2nd Regiment, Prince Alex's assigned soldiers. "Is the 9th princess here and safe?" the man anxiously demanded as he was led into the camp. "Who is asking about the 9th princess?" Dominic demanded. "Oh, Lord Sorcerer. Wonderful. I wasn't sure if you really had come with the regiment, or if the princess was still in hiding somewhere. The 2nd prince sends his best wishes and a letter. This one is for you. I have one for Her Highness as well, if she is with you." the messenger explained. Princess Alexis came out from inside the truck and smiled at the messenger. Relax, this is Thomas, one of my second brother's personal servants. They've been together for their entire lives, she explained. The man bowed to her, then smirked. You look interesting with dark hair, Your Highness. Your second brother will be here momentarily, and I suspect that he won't object to staying overnight before moving on. Alexis nodded. It's been too long. How goes the war in the East? The East and the South have fallen to the might of Signia's armies. All of the former Wavemates territories all the way to Kainwen have been captured. Eastern Dagos is now under our control, and the first prince has led 100 airships to the north to take Modbury. We received a communication from Viscount Boscombe that was most concerning, and chose to take a force to verify its authenticity. Thomas explained. In short, well over half of Dagos was now in enemy hands. If the Viscount Boscombe had not managed to secure the throne by now, it was too late. The first prince would be on his doorstep in a matter of days, with an army supported by airships, and a Dagos princess as his wife to secure his own claim to the throne. The regiment led the second prince to the south side of the canyon, while his soldiers blocked the eastern hill. Give the order for the regiment to gather on this side of the road. There is no more need for us to be separated. We will be behind the lines as of tomorrow morning, Dominic instructed. Prince Alex got down from a mechanical horse and pulled his sister into a hug. It's good to see you again, little sister. I thought that things were going to turn out badly there for a few days. Bring your betrothed, and we will discuss this in your command center, he insisted. Princess Alexis led the way to the tent, and a pair of the prince's officers followed them in. Have you had a chance to read the letters yet? Prince Alex asked. Alexis shook her head. Not yet. You got here just after we finished questioning Thomas about current events. I take it this is something important. The prince nodded grimly. You could say that. Viscount Boscombe has invited us to his coronation, and implied that he had an arrangement with you about ending the war if he managed it. However, Prince Kaizan sent a very similar letter, informing us that the Viscount was in poor health and would be abdicating his candidacy for the throne. We will be headed for Albrol's city under the guise of a diplomatic envoy, but I don't expect that the transition is going to go as smoothly as I had hoped. Dominic chuckled softly. So, Boscombe is a man of his word, and Kaizan is open about his intent to kill the Viscount now that his armies have lost, and his political influence is waning? Does that about sum it up? The prince winked at him. On the surface, yes. Under that, there are hundreds of major and minor nobles, all with their own estates, interests, and alliances. The crown prince has a number of the more influential ones from the southeastern regions aboard an airship with him at the moment, in case things devolve to the point where it is more advantageous for him to take over Dagos and abdicate Signia to me. I wouldn't put it past him to want to keep them both, but it's no secret that such a plan would never be acceptable to any of the neighboring nations. Chapter 186. Dragged back in. Dominic served a round of drinks after purifying them, and sat down on the advisor's chair along the wall as Princess Alexis launched into an annoyed tirade. So, we get to watch the political theater in Dagos play out, while trying not to get too deeply involved, but also not so uninvolved that our allies feel that we've left them hanging in the wind. Lovely, she declared. The prince shrugged. I don't see why you're so upset about it. This comes with the position. We sit around, listen to nobles whine, make sure that things go our way, and then leave. It's the same everywhere that we go. The only difference is that this time we're in Dagos and not some disgruntled border baron's estate. Coincidentally, we're running low on those. Too many of the border barons were swayed by either coin or promised reforms under the Dagos monarchy that would have made them virtual tyrants on their own land. The sort of thing that we did away with centuries ago. I shouldn't be surprised, I suppose. There were always nobles who complained about the limits put on their power. We just didn't see the betrayal coming. Alexis rolled her eyes at the comment. Some of them had seen it coming. The moment that the Dagos prince started to promise them unlimited rights to abuse the peasantry, it was inevitable that many of them would turn. She was well aware of just how despicable many of them were. There were still some suitable options, though. Well, once we get this all sorted, I have an entire regiment full of loyal nobles in need of titles and lands. She suggested. Well, we can discuss that after the war is properly over. I will have my men set up for the evening. Where is your tent set? Prince Alex asked. Alexis gestured to the truck and the prince frowned. You didn't set a tent? I suppose that's reasonable if you're in hiding. Speaking of which, I don't see your ladies in waiting. The princess smirked at him. I didn't bring them. A little taste of how the other side lives, with no domestic staff and no devoted servants to stroke their ego. Well, maybe just not as many. I've still got Dominic. The second prince chuckled. You know that Claudius is going to be furious, right? Not just a little upset, but properly furious. I hope that you thought this through. The princess nodded. I did, and I suspect that there will be more consequences than simply father's anger that I didn't marry into wealth. It may have only been Daigos involved in the attack, but I don't recall any of the other royals being too upset at the apparent end of the Dragon King's lineage. Bringing a Wavemate's prince back into royal life is going to ruffle more than a few feathers. The prince nodded, his pale eyes sparkling with amusement. And it doesn't matter if he tries to calm them or if he loses his temper. There is no way to win. Either they will accuse him of bewitching them, or of having gone feral. Dominic chuckled, and Prince Alex simply shrugged. The Dragonkin gunsmith might be popular in the Signia Palace, but that didn't mean anything to strangers and foreign royals. I am more concerned about how the Daigos nobility will react when they see me in Albrols. The last time that I checked, they still consider me a war criminal. Dominic reminded them. The two royals frowned. That could be an issue, but perhaps the Viscount will see sense. I suppose that we could disguise you, but I suspect that he already knows who you are. If you just keep a hat on, it should be fine for the first round of meetings. Alexis suggested. Prince Alex shrugged. I say that we put him up front with his hair slicked back, so nobody misses the horns, and a dragon core in his hand, like a living tactical weapon in waiting. Level 200 Berserk Dragonkin in the throne room. I like it, solid intimidation tactic. Alexis laughed. Dominic sighed. I really do need to put more work into leveling my spells. If I'm supposed to be the one doing the dirty work in the background, I should really have the skills to actually do it. Prince Alex nodded. I have advantages as a battle mage, since I can make mana cores to imbue spell gems with power, though they take too long to make to be efficient. But if you can't get to level 10 on at least 1 or 2 combat skills, it will be difficult for you in the future. Dominic nodded. I've got spells at level 8 now, so not too much further to go. I'm just short on monster cores. Well, sort of. I've got some, but I'm going to need them soon for spending money. Understandable. If you're going to ask for a princess and a peerage, you will need as much money as you can get. Alex joked. Well, it's unlikely we will get actual war reparations, so I'll have to figure something out. Maybe I should ask for a rural peerage, so we can go out and hunt monsters with the manor guards. Dominic replied. Alexis laughed, but the prince nodded in agreement. It might be the only way to keep her happy. A stocked library and plenty of monsters to hunt. Perhaps somewhere north of Wistfield? That area is very rural, and there are plenty of monsters of all sorts but good fields. Assuming you can keep the farmers alive to work them. Dominic shrugged. I'm sure that we can arm and train a guard detachment relatively easily. That's one part of the noble skill set that we are certainly not lacking in. Prince Alex smiled at his sister, then nodded in agreement with Dominic. Good point. Frontier monster hunting might just be exactly the sort of life for you two. I just hope that you don't steal too many of the paladins when you go. Chapter 187. Self-help books. Prince Alex took a book from his storage ring and handed it to Dominic. I'm not sure if you can learn this, but if you can, it might really speed up your progress. It's the art of making mana crystals. Normally, only mages make them, but it's possible that sorcerers do too if they know the technique. Our father is much more relaxed about non-humans than his father was. But there is still a lot that is kept secret about Dragonkin magic because the Wavemates kings didn't trust others not to use it against them. You should be able to make a crystal up to your current innate level, but I don't know how that will work for you, as you're not a mage. For me, my innate level is 5. The level that I can increase new spell gems to based on the level of my battle mage core. But that takes too much work for most people, so they just stop when they get a level 1 or 2 crystal and call it good. To get a newly attuned gem to the peak of level 1, it takes about 5 levels of mana cores. That increases with every level of the spell gem or trade skill core. It's not static for everyone. The higher your affinity, the lower the increase. But in general, the most proficient are around a 50% increase with every level. The least compatible users need around double the mana per level. That will vary with every spell and Magitech device that you get. Some Magitech devices take inordinately high amounts of materials to increase, but that is usually because they have an exceptional effect or a combination of multiple different effects built into them, which don't perfectly align with each other. Now, at first, it's not bad. Even if you needed 10 levels to reach the peak of level 1, most mages will need around 60 to get to level 5. That's a reasonable number that most common guards and workers can expect to reach. But you'll need nearly 1,000 to get to the start of level 9, 4,000 to get to level 11, and nearly 1,000,000 to get to level 20. So, very few make it past level 10. The cost in both time and mana to get past that point is simply too high. The more that you use a spell, the more affinity that you get to it, and that is why you will eventually level up a spell gem with time. It's not as much a matter of use giving it more energy, but of attunement improving, and the stored energy you have already given it becoming more effective. Use the Mana Stone creation technique, then practice your spells constantly, and you should get a few of them from level 8 to 10 easily enough, assuming that your compatibility was mediocre. If it was already good, it will be harder to gain with practice but easier to grow with the mana crystals. If you can master that skill, then I will give you a book on materia gem creation, and you can pass on your magical skills with new spell gems. That's the real moneymaker, no matter what the Magitech engineers say. Princess Alexis chuckled as her brother finished getting sidetracked with excitement about someone new learning the arts of the mage lords. What he hadn't told Dominic was that the skill he was giving him instructions for was not one that all mages could use. Only those with exceptional talent or years of practice could master it. But Dominic's eyes lit up as he read the book, and within seconds, he was forming a tiny crystal in his hand. When it got to the size of a chicken egg, it would be at level 1. But at the rate Dominic was going, that would take hours. Still, he appeared to have needed mere seconds to master the technique that took most mages a decade to learn. That's just cheating. I spent 3 weeks learning that skill, and he gets it just by reading the instructions once. Actually, I don't even think he finished the instructions. He definitely didn't get into the explanatory chapters. Prince Alex muttered. Dominic's crystal was growing rapidly as mana flowed from all around him, turning it to an egg-sized level 1 mana crystal in only a few minutes. Oh, I like it. That's a good skill. Thank you. Your aptitude for that is simply ridiculous. If you keep it up, there is no reason that you shouldn't be able to increase your primary skills to the level of a master before you're 30. Prince Alex commended him. Are you not at level 40 on your primary gem already? You can't be 30 yet, Dominic asked. The prince chuckled and shook his head. I had a fortunate encounter, you could say. I have exceptional affinity for my chosen gem. That is true. But I managed to obtain an ancient artifact that caused rapid growth. That's how I got so far ahead at my age. Dominic nodded in understanding. Oh, that makes more sense. I thought that there was some secret skill hack that was kept from the public so that we didn't have superhumans running around causing chaos. The prince blinked once, slowly, then stared at Dominic. What? Superhumans running around causing chaos? What exactly do you think Dragonkin and the other monster-blooded sorcerers are? Given another few decades, you'll have the strength to throw a grown man through walls and the innate magic to raise cities. Half of the Dago's noblemen are going to be utterly terrified of your presence, and the other half will demand that anything involving your presence be done with an anti-magic barrier up. I would also be sure to keep a barrier up on your room because after thousands of attempts, the only way that they found to kill the Dragon King was to transform an assassin to look like one of his consorts and kill him in his sleep. Awake! They couldn't manage it. Prince Alex reminded him. I had always wondered how they managed that. If the Dragon King was supposed to be so terrifying, It didn't make sense that the nation fell so fast. Dominic agreed. Nobody really knows the truth, I suppose. The assassinated in his sleep theory is just a rumor that Dagos spread because there were no survivors of the events at the palace. Nobody but the Dagos king, and perhaps his advisors, truly knows what happened that day. Dominic sighed. And they're mostly dead or 100 years old now. Chapter 188. Leave at first light. We should sleep early so that we can get moving at first light. The road is good, but it is a long way to Albrol City. Prince Alex insisted, changing the topic. Then we will see you in the morning, Alexis replied, before she gave him a hug and dragged Dominic back to the truck to help her get ready for bed. Alex shook his head as he watched them leave. Of all of his brothers and sisters, he had never seen one of them so eager to get married and start living a domestic life. Well, to begin living whatever twisted version of domesticity they had come up with between them. Most of his siblings' spouses hardly tolerated each other for the first few months until they got used to each other's presence. He had at least known his wife before they were betrothed, but none of the royals had married a childhood friend or frequent acquaintance in this generation. That was deliberately done so that the attempts to embed lovers into the lives of the royals didn't give any of the upper nobles a leg up. But he knew that there were a few playboys and amenable ladies who had been recommended by other siblings as a marriage match. So it wasn't a total failure. For a moment he considered saying something. But the entire regiment was used to their arrangement at this point, so there wasn't much he could do now except hurry the wedding along when the war was over. Before dawn, Dominic was awake, setting up a shower tent with a campfire under the water tank, so that the princess could get a properly warm shower before they headed to the city. After an extended deployment, it took at least 2 showers to get yourself smelling pleasant again. So starting this morning would save time on evening preparations after they arrived in Albrols. Assuming that it didn't immediately turn into a battle, that was. Dominic helped the princess into a fancier dress after breakfast, and the convoy set out west down the highway. The first few hours were quiet, with nothing moving in their scouting range. Only after they had stopped for lunch did the convoy first encounter anyone, and that was a Dagos army unit headed the same direction that they were. The scouts returned to the regiment, and the flags of a diplomatic envoy were raised. Everyone had their weapons ready, unsure how the Dagos army would respond. The Signia force pulled up beside the Dagos soldiers, who moved off the road, and sent an officer to greet them. "Commander, might we ask which envoy you are representing?" The officer asked as Commander Dax stopped in front of him. "The second prince of Signia, Prince Alex. His honor guard is escorting him to Albrols for the coronation event in 3 days." Dax replied, while trying not to make it obvious that his hand was resting next to his revolver. "I see. Which coronation are you to attend?" the officer asked. "We received messages from both Viscount Boscom and Prince Kaizan. We are eager to see how the situation plays out." Dax replied, "We will accompany you to the new capital. For your safety." The officer insisted after a moment of thought. "Certainly. Lead the way, we will follow your pace, as we have no infantry." Commander Dax agreed. The Dagos army didn't have anyone on foot, but their infantry transports were not made for high speeds. There were 4 long benches on a truck bed with a canvas sunshade, and the soldiers were packed tight with their gear at their feet. It was a rough and uncomfortable ride, with terrible suspension. So, the Signia convoy slowed their speed to match as they rode through the afternoon, and then made camp 2 hours before sunset, when they met with another Dagos army convoy headed for Albrols. Princess Alexis stayed in the carriage with her brother while Dominic went out to get them dinner and meet with the Dagos leadership. He was in his best sorcerer robes, with a hat on and his hood up, despite the late afternoon heat, so it seemed safe enough to talk for a few minutes and make sure he wasn't a strange face to the soldiers when they arrived at Albrols. "Sir, how might we help you?" a camp guard asked as Dominic approached the edge of the Signia camp. "I just came to make introductions. I am Royal Advisor Dominic. If your officers have any requests, they can come to me instead of the unit officers. More efficient that way. However, I do notice that your unit is serving beans and rice for dinner, and I have a peace offering of sorts." Dominic took out one of the cured hams, formerly from a Dago's military supply shipment, but stripped of its packaging. Split it among your men. Who knows when they'll get another shipment? He offered. Thank you, advisor. You didn't hear this from me, but lately only certain units have been getting properly supplied, and a suspicious number of them have gone missing afterward, along with the soldiers carrying the supplies. The officer whispered. Dominic nodded, then turned to return to his camp. Some things couldn't be said too loudly, but the officer had confirmed that the desertion rates and lack of supplies were becoming an issue for Dagos. Dominic joined the Signia soldiers at the cook fire as the officer subtly cut the ham in half and sent half to the other unit camped near them. The rest was mixed with the rice and beans, and the camps settled in for a tense night. There was no trust between Dagos and Signia, but curiously there wasn't much more between the Dagos regiments. They're not sure which candidate for king the other officers support. Commander Dax whispered as Dominic prepared plates for the royal siblings. The Viscount said that most of the army supported Prince Kaizen. Could that be why some units haven't been getting supplies? They weren't loyal enough to the prince, so his cronies cut their support. Dominic asked. That's our theory. We can't prove it yet, but it is the most likely case. Dax agreed. So, we might not be walking into a succession battle but day one of a civil war. Dominic realized. And we may be the deciding factor in who gets support for the throne, as Signia's armies are overrunning the nation. Dax added ruefully. I hope you brought more rum. Chapter 189, Crowded Airspace. The next morning, all 3 units packed up and began heading for Albrols. They were far from alone. Not even the sky was empty. The second prince's airship escort had gone on ahead of them, scouting for the regiment, in case there were ambushes. But there were foreign airships coming in as well. West Kyria, Bastaviria, Chip, and a half-dozen others had emblazoned their royal colors on the envelope of their airships and sent them here for the coronation. Most of them would only contain a ranking dignitary, such as the second prince, who would be officially representing Signia. But still, it was an impressive showing. The aggression and desperation of Dagos hadn't gone unnoticed, and everyone was becoming concerned that if Signia didn't fall, then their smaller northern neighbors might be the next targets of Dagos' armies. And if Signia did fall, they were certain that they would be, just not as soon. It took time to consolidate a conquest, after all. More than that, they wondered if a new king might put an end to the war and sign a peace treaty between the nations that would stave off future aggressions for another generation. The outskirts of Albrols came into sight, and Dominic realized that the war's progress was much faster than he had believed. Tens of thousands of Signia soldiers from the 3rd and 5th armies were gathered around the city, and the radio transmitter was broadcasting news of a temporary ceasefire, with the airships to their north halting their attack on Modbury and Bamberbury, pending the result of the coronation. Those were some of the largest cities in the nation, and if they were being besieged from above, and by the Crown Prince's First Army, then it wouldn't be a stretch to say that Dagos was nearly finished. As they approached the city, the Dagos forces fell into a protective formation around the Signia regiments, providing an escort for them right to the edge of the 3rd Army's camp. Advisor, please inform His Highness that arrangements have been made for your forces to camp here. His Highness and any nobleman among your regiment may request rooms at the palace, should you wish to remain within the city. The Dagos commander informed Dominic through the window of the truck. That made the soldiers laugh, and the man gave them a confused look. This is the Natural Sons Regiment commander. They are all noblemen. Every single one of the cavalry is the son of a titled nobleman. I don't believe that it will be necessary to bring them all to the palace, though. If you allow the prince time to get his men settled here, I will relay the number of Royal Honor Guard who will accompany us into the city. Dominic agreed after Prince Alex motioned for him to take care of the problem. The Dagos commander retreated to his own unit to wait, and Dominic turned to the prince. So, how are we going to do this? Surprise them with the princess? Ride in openly? Put on a show of force? Dominic asked. We will reveal the princess once we're in the palace compound. I don't want to give Prince Kaizen any extra time to plot against her before the real show starts. Prince Alex decided. Do I get a say in this? Alexis asked. Of course. If you want to do it a different way, we can. But with both Dominic and myself in the group, we're already going to grab some attention. I think that letting them find out at the last minute that the bride the bastard prince demanded is here in the palace should throw them into chaos. When he put it that way, Dominic couldn't help but laugh. The nobles of Dagos hated him with a passion, but the second prince had assassinated their king. Surely, they had realized it by now, with Signia informing the world that the incident was a duel, despite the king's advanced age. "How many men should we bring?" Dominic asked. "None." The two royals replied at the same time. Dominic frowned. "Is that wise?" Alexis shrugged, and Alex smirked. "Maybe not, but they don't have anyone who can take me in a fight, and I have prepared wards for our rooms. The smaller we make them, the stronger they will be. Showing up with just two royals and an advisor when our armies are camped all around the city is a properly provocative show of power. Don't you think?" Dominic sighed. "All right. Should I tell the commander that we're ready as soon as Commander Dax starts to set camp?" "Please do. This will be fun. I can feel it already," Princess Alexis replied. Dominic exited the truck and passed out the orders to set camp wherever they thought was best, then went for the hard part, explaining to Commander Dax and the other leaders that they would be going without any royal guards or honor guard. "I know that look, it means I'm not going to like what you have to say. Are we setting up for a siege? We're a bit short on ammunition for that." Commander Dax greeted him. "Not yet. Hopefully not at all. His Highness, the second prince, has decided that only the two royals plus myself will be entering the city as the delegation. I would say plus the two drivers for the truck, but that's not set in stone. They might want to go by mechanical horse," Dominic whispered. Commander Dax frowned. "If that's how it is, I will ensure that the team in the truck gets a few extra rounds of mortars." Dominic patted him on the shoulder. "Don't worry about that. I will make some and pass them through the window. Just sit tight and be prepared for literally anything to happen. Don't forget that Dagos knows the second prince killed their king." "Holy hell, I forgot about that. Well, I suppose it's better that you don't bring the whole regiment when you put it that way. They might mistake it as a demand for surrender," Dax muttered. Chapter 190. Entering Albrols. Dominic watched as the drivers swapped out for a pair of riflemen who were gunslingers, skilled in close-range pistol work. "Commander, we are ready to go. 2 drivers, plus 3 in the royal retinue, myself included. We won't be bringing any extra guards with us," Dominic informed the Dagos unit's leader. Are you sure about that?" the commander asked. "The second prince is adamant." Dominic agreed. The soldier shrugged. "If he's sure, he's sure. It's not my place to argue with royals. Rest assured, we will get you safely to the palace." Dominic turned to leave and heard the soldier mutter, "I'll be damned if I have to find out what that psychopath of a prince does if someone attacks his transport on my watch." Smart man. Once Dominic was back on board, the truck turned to join the escort, and the Signia royal banners were hung from the sides of the passenger compartment. There would be no mistakes about who was inside, only about what exactly their intent was. Dominic kept his word and made another 20 rounds of mortar ammunition for each of the drivers as they traveled, while the prince gave him a bemused smile. "Are you expecting them to need that much artillery in the palace? Or hoping they'll need that much artillery in the palace?" he asked. "I'm hoping they don't need any artillery in the palace. But realistically, I fully expect to kill someone in the first hour after we arrive," Dominic explained. Princess Alexis nodded. "That would not surprise me. But if someone does challenge you to a duel, I recommend that you choose either magic or unarmed as the mode of combat. Unarmed combat only prohibits any form of external weapon, so you're technically free to roast them with flame breath." Her brother gave a dramatic, very fake gasp. "My dear sister, surely you wouldn't encourage your advisor to take such dishonorable actions on your behalf. Would it be better if he bombarded them with fireballs or fired a mortar at them?" she retorted. The prince chuckled. He would pay good money to see the nobleman's reactions if Dominic took out a mortar launcher as his weapon in a duel. They would only be standing 10 paces apart. He wouldn't even be out of the blast radius of his own weapon. The truck entered the city, and Dominic heard the crowds hush as they rolled past. Moments earlier, they were loud and curious about the dignitaries entering the city. But now that they had seen a Signia transport with the royal standard on it, the citizens gathered along the road had fallen silent. The silence of the crowd followed them all the way to the gates of the palace, and Dominic stepped out of the truck to announce the royals, as they didn't bring any staff. Presenting the second prince and the 9th princess of Signia, he stated simply, in a voice that carried over the hushed crowd. Normally, a herald would give as many formal titles as they had time for, but Dominic had forgotten to ask before they had reached the city. The simple and direct announcement had the desired effect, though. The crowd exploded with noise as the two royals stepped out without an escort or any guards, looking supremely confident and walking arm in arm toward the Viscount Boscombe, who had come to greet them. Dominic moved to stand behind them as they greeted the Viscount, who had a welcoming smile on his face. "Good, you made it on time. I was unsure if you would receive our invitation," the Viscount announced. "Indeed, we couldn't miss such a monumental occasion. It isn't often that a new king ascends the throne." Prince Alex agreed. From off to Dominic's right, a second welcoming committee approached, led by Prince Kaisan. His eyes looked haunted and hollow, as if he hadn't been sleeping at all lately, and he had lost weight since they had seen him in Signia, but he still carried himself as a prince. "Welcome, honored guests from Signia. It is our pleasure to welcome you here for the coronation of our next king." Prince Kaisan greeted them. "It will be quite the event, I am sure," Prince Alex replied dryly, while the exhausted Dagos prince leered at Alexis. The two sides of the Dagos delegation were standing apart, leaving a clear 3-meter separation, as if it might turn into a battle at any moment. "Future kings, it has been a long campaign. Perhaps we could meet after my lovely sister and her fiancé have had a chance to freshen up?" Prince Alex asked. Both of the candidates for the next king of Dagos froze in shock. "Fiancé," Prince Kaisan finally stammered. "Yes, father has already approved the match, and the wedding will be set for a date that doesn't interfere with international affairs." Prince Alex agreed, while Alexis blushed. Kaisan looked as if he is about to explode, even before Dominic winked at him. "We will see about that. Before the wedding, plans can change," he snarled, then turned and stormed away. The nobles nearby shook their heads in dismay. The prince was becoming increasingly unhinged as he lost power and influence, but he still had control of most of the military, and few would dare to cross him. Viscount Boscombe cleared his throat. "Allow my men to escort you to your suite. There is a formal dinner arranged for this evening, and it will be attended by royals from most of the region." Prince Alex nodded. "We will be there. Please arrange one suite for our party, and rooms for our drivers." "Of course. This way, please. The staff will show your drivers to their rooms." "Tell me, are they nobles or commoners?" The Viscount replied. "Noble sons. But I would recommend not putting them near the maids' quarters. They have been on campaign for some time," Prince Alex replied. A few of the nearby nobles chuckled at his response. It didn't matter whether they were near the maids or not. Most unmarried young soldiers would go looking for a pretty lady as soon as they were left unattended. The fact that they were born of nobility just made them an even greater threat of misbehavior, as they would have some money and perhaps even a portion of the estate to manage. Much more attractive than a penniless commoner drafted into the militia. Chapter 191. Albrol's Palace. While the palace here officially belonged to the Duke Albrols and his family, the Dagos royal palace hadn't been moved when the nation began to increase in population. It was on the shores of Nazian Lake and outside the city of Nazian. Once upon a time, it had been a lake retreat for the royal family, but as the branches of the royal family gained more influence, the actual monarch had been silently shuffled away from the major population centers. So, there were former royal palaces in most of the major cities at the core of Dagos. The suite that they were led to was on the ground level, with access to a large garden, overlooked by 3 other suites. Prince Alex walked out to inspect the security situation, and was immediately drawn into conversation with a trio of princesses from Bastaviria. They were attending the coronation with their elder brother, as a way of meeting more royals and possibly finding a suitable match. Like Signia, Bastaviria had an abundance of royals in this generation, but they were also a small and densely populated nation, so it was exceedingly difficult for them to find a proper match without making every landed nobleman a prince consort. However, as younger princesses, they didn't have any particular objection to life as a powerful prince's concubine, especially the second prince of Signia, who was known to favor his wife. That meant, even if they were given to him in a political marriage, he would be unlikely to make life difficult for them as they idled away their days. That attitude of unambitious satisfaction was anathema to the second prince, but he put on a polite face and resigned himself to entertaining the princesses until it was time for him to get ready for dinner. While Alex was busy in the garden, Dominic followed the princess into the bathing room. He untied the laces on her dress, the same as he did every evening, and was about to leave when the princess's voice stopped him. "Did you know that there is a custom among the paladins of the royal order? If someone of the opposite gender sees you bare, you should marry them immediately to maintain your chaste status," she whispered. Dominic turned around to see what she was talking about, just in time to see her dress puddle on the floor at her feet as Princess Alexis turned around. "Perfect. Utterly perfect," Dominic muttered, mostly to himself, as he absorbed the sight in front of his eyes. The princess' body was flawlessly toned, with far more muscle definition than he had expected on a noble lady, and crisscrossed with tiny scars from training and battles. Dominic remained frozen in place as she took one step forward, then grabbed his horn to pull his head down to her level. Her eyes fluttered closed as Princess Alexis pulled Dominic into a gentle kiss on the lips. Then she turned him around by the horn and kicked him in the backside. "Now out so I can get ready. If they sent a chambermaid, send her in," she insisted, while Dominic tried to gather his wits. "Of course, princess. Call if you need anything." The maids giggled to themselves when they came in and found the royal advisor standing in the middle of the room, staring off into space with a silly grin on his face. "He's down bad. The princess is a lucky lady to have found a man so devoted," one of them whispered, breaking Dominic from his reverie. "Ah, wonderful timing. Her Highness is preparing for the meeting in the bathing room and has requested assistance, as we didn't travel with any servants." Dominic greeted them. "Of course, advisor. Will you be requiring a manservant as well? The dress code is royal formal. No armor or visible weapons." The maid replied, "I will be fine, but please leave shaving supplies and scissors." Dominic requested. The maid bowed. "We will call for a barber to come to you. There are a few on staff for last-minute hair issues." "Excellent." His hair was getting too long to stay where he put it after bathing. By the time that Dominic was showered and changed, the barber was waiting for him, along with one other young man in livery Dominic didn't recognize. "Might I ask who this is?" he inquired, going for a polite tone. "The observer from Mitfield, Lord Sorcerer. Given the recent instability in Dagos, it was deemed unwise to allow their attendants to serve foreign royalty in private." The young man replied in a grave tone. The barber sighed and nodded. "One of the staff tried to poison a guest. Rest assured, such a thing will not be allowed to happen again." Dominic chuckled. There has been a lot of that going around, as well as attacks by staff hired out of Dagos years ago. Signia has put much effort into weeding out traitors since the war began. But if the barber was going to give him a trim and a shave, that meant having both scissors and a razor around his head, and Dominic could see why that would be an assassination risk. Mitfield was generally considered to be on Signia's side in the conflict, though they had not committed to sending any troops north to reinforce Signia's nobles. So, Dominic settled into the chair to get his hair done, and tried to hide his amusement as the observer glared at the barber. The position of barber was considered a high-trust job for any nobleman, as the barber would routinely have a razor to your neck, and that wasn't a position that you would let a man you couldn't trust have. Within minutes, Dominic looked like a proper nobleman, freshly trimmed and shaved, and the barber was hurried off to take care of another client. The maids brought Princess Alexis out a few minutes later, looking radiant in a deep purple gown with silver flowers embroidered along the length to emphasize her curves. that had to be custom-tailored for her, as the embroidery fit her curves so well, and Dominic began to wonder just how much clothing she had to carry in her storage items. "Is everyone ready?" she asked, looking around and not finding her brother. "The second prince is in the courtyard, entertaining the princesses of Bastaviria, I believe," Dominic explained. Princess Alexis laughed. "I should have expected that. With 3 other suites facing the courtyard, there would be at least 1 or 2 eligible young nobles or royals in the area. Being famous has its downsides." The prince came back in a few minutes later, looking exhausted and smelling like perfume. Alexis giggled and winked at him. "You big softy, you never did have the heart to tell them off and make them cry. Now, should we head for dinner? It's a bit early still, but we shouldn't be the first ones in the room." Prince Alex turned to the maids, who bowed politely. "Your Highness, the junior nobles are already assembled. You would be the first royals in attendance." The prince nodded once. "Then let's get going. If they're going to plot, they can do it with us in the room." Chapter 192. Well, that's just rude. The herald at the door to the Great Hall froze in shock for a moment when the Signia delegation appeared a full 15 minutes earlier than they were expected. Announcing the second prince of Signia, Archmage Alex Cygnus, the Kingslayer. Announcing the 9th princess of Signia, Alexis Cygnus. Then he paused. Announcing the Signia royal advisor, Lord Sorcerer Dominic Wavemates, the Butcher of Wistover. Dominic smiled and the Dago's nobles flinched. "They're not gonna let that go. You must have really gotten under their skin." Prince Alex whispered. Dominic shook his head. "At least they're nice to you." Alexis rolled her eyes. "What was the point of trying to disguise you if they were going to just announce your name when we entered the room? But you're right. They really are holding a grudge over a battle from 10 years ago. It seems a bit extreme, don't you think? Keep your guard up. They must be planning to use that status against you during the upcoming meetings, or perhaps even as an excuse to try to expel you from the meetings and demand your exile." Prince Alex turned to whisper to the pair, who were lowering their voices, but not particularly concerned about being overheard. "Just let it slide. They've been playing up the danger of the Dragon King's lineage for a decade to justify their actions. If they suddenly started welcoming him now, everyone would wonder what was going on, and accuse the staff of being traitors." Dominic heard the muttering, shrugged, and then removed his hat to shake out his hair. "If we're not being subtle, then I might as well be comfortable. Your Highness, would you like a beverage?" Dominic asked, while gesturing for a server to come over with drinks. Out of habit, Dominic cast Quality Kibble, his food and drink purification spell, over the tray as the server approached, and noticed that every one of the drinks flashed a different color. "Wow, we really are popular." Prince Alex chuckled as he cast a spell of his own. The server was sweating heavily as they approached, unaware of the fact that the 2 mages had both cleansed the poisons from the drinks on the tray. "I should refrain from drinking," Princess Alexis declined, and Dominic realized that only he saw the lights as the toxins were identified and removed from the drinks. Dominic took a glass of champagne, toasted the room, and then downed half the glass before taking a second sip to savor the taste. "That's actually quite good. It's got a bit of a spicy aftertaste. Was that an aphrodisiac? While I appreciate their effort, I'm hardly of an age to need such things." Dominic joked when he realized he could still taste the neutralized toxins in the drink. The gathered nobles simply stared at him. Did he notice that it was poisoned and then drink it anyhow? One of the Dago's nobles asked. "I swear he did. Maybe he took an antitoxin in advance? But how would he know what was going to be in it?" One of the others asked. Prince Alex smiled at Dominic and handed him another drink. "What is this one? How good are your taste buds?" Dominic sipped the drink and frowned. "That one is sweet. Not a great combination for champagne. Strange aftertaste. I don't know that one." A Dago's royal steward came over with a bucket and dumped the remainder of the drinks, then bowed parallel to the ground. "Please accept our apologies, Your Highness. It is not the will of the crown that you should be harmed in any way," he insisted, raising his voice as a warning to the nobles during the last part. The steward had to wonder if these nobles had lost what few brain cells they once possessed. Attempting to kill the second prince when there was an entire Signia army camped within artillery range of the palace? Forget that the attempt would most likely fail with the sorcerer and the princess, who had holy magic, standing next to him. Just attempting would be suicidal for everyone in the building. Announcing the 4th Prince of Bastaviria, Nathan Bostover. Announcing the 10th Princess of Bastaviria. Announcing the 11th Princess of Bastaviria. Announcing the 12th Princess of Bastaviria. The herald at the door declared, breaking the tension. The 3 princesses were an instant attraction for all of the single nobles in the room, and the attention was drawn away from the spectacle of the Signia delegation taunting the Dagos nobles by deliberately drinking poisoned beverages. With 2 groups of royals already in attendance, the rest of the nobles rushed to attend, leaving only 2 guests conspicuously absent. The next to enter was Viscount Boscombe, with Prince Kaisan right behind him, looking frustrated. The Viscount stopped at the top of the stairs with an older noble at his left shoulder, and Prince Kaisan on his right. The man that Dominic didn't know was the first to speak. Welcome to Albroles, everyone. I know that I am new to the position, and many of you are not familiar faces to me, but I am the new Duke Albroles. We have gathered you all for the coronation of the new King of Dagos, but as you may have gathered, that point is in some contention at the moment. However, we anticipate that the situation will be resolved before the official coronation ceremony begins. So please, eat, drink, and enjoy your time in Albroles Castle. It didn't escape anyone's notice that the Signia delegation, as small as it was with only 3 members, didn't touch any more of the beverages or appetizers before the dinner started. That stopped a number of the other nobles from indulging, as they were afraid of being the victim of an attack not meant for them, and the atmosphere in the room was becoming increasingly tense. The man who had dumped all the drinks from the tray that Dominic had first sampled from made his way to the Duke to give a report, which clearly didn't go over well, if the hushed shouting and the way that the Duke pinched the bridge of his nose were anything to go by. Whatever the man had found was so bad that the Duke actually looked visibly relieved when the signal was given to head to the tables for the formal dinner. Chapter 193, Mixed Seating. That optimism might have been misplaced, Dominic realized once they were seated. The delegations were mixed between small round tables, intended for members of royal families to socialize freely during the dinner. However, the person who made the guest seating chart had either used outdated political alliances as their guide, or had done them strictly by national power rankings. So, the second prince was seated at a table with Viscount Boscombe, the 4th Prince of Bastaviria and the Crown Prince of Schiphol, plus a few nobles that Dominic didn't recognize. Whereas he was seated at a table with Princess Alexis, and named as her fiancée on the place cards, while Prince Kaisan glared at them from the next table over, and the group of Dagos generals and advisors at their table looked increasingly nervous. Well, at the very least, we got the table with the best conversation. I can't imagine how stuffy and fake some of the other tables are right now, Princess Alexis muttered. The general on her left smiled. You speak the truth, Princess. I am General Widgeon, son of Count Widgeon, from the far north of Dagos. These are the advisor Albroles, General Modbury and their wives. As they were introduced, everyone gave the princess a polite smile. If you didn't already know, I am the 9th Princess of Signia, Alexis Cygnus. This is Royal Advisor and Lord Sorcerer Dominic Wavemates. She replied. Lady Modbury smiled at Dominic. It's a pleasure to meet you, Advisor. I must say that when I heard of your fearsome reputation, I thought that at the very least, you would be a senior from the 2nd Prince's Battle Mage Corps. I was not expecting a young bachelor. The general coughed, and his wife winked at him. What? We both know that it's unlikely our Waverley is going to remarry Heir than a concubine. The sorcerer is a wonderful choice. I can't imagine that anyone would dare to bully her again if she were in his house. The woman, already far more tipsy than her polished appearance had let on, replied. Remarry? Dominic asked. A war widow, sadly. There are a lot of them to go around, and the pressure to take concubines to salvage the dignity of the widows will be strong once the succession is settled. General Widgeon explained. Princess Alexis nodded. I don't think that the succession will take long. There are many wise men in this room, and I am quite certain that they will see sense. Well, most of them. I will have someone look into who tried to poison us today. Perhaps a formal duel will remind them to behave. Behind them, Prince Kaizen scoffed. And what if the person you find is someone of rank? He asked, turning his chair to face the princess. Princess Alexis smiled serenely at him. I believe that recent events have proven that kings and barons both fall just as easily in a duel. Even if it is someone of higher rank, we won't shy away from holding them culpable for the attempted assassination of visiting dignitaries under a diplomatic flag. The foreign nobles at Prince Kaizen's table looked uneasy at the comment. The attempt on the Signia delegation was not exactly subtle after Dominic and Alex not only found, but loudly and publicly began to identify, the poisons placed in multiple drinks on the tray brought to them. They hadn't taken any action yet, but it was only a matter of time before they did, and both men had reputations within Dagos which few would want to challenge. Prince Kaizen slammed his hands on the table. You think that you can just waltz in here and treat a Prince of Dagos any way that you please? Princess Alexis dabbed at her mouth with a napkin before answering. Prince Kaizen, might I remind you that we have more artillery deployed around the city than you have adult males left within the walls? It would behoove you to keep that temper of yours in check, and count yourself lucky that we have not deigned to stoop to your level. But don't think that we won't if it becomes necessary. Even if we have to eliminate 7 generations of the families of every Dagos noble that wishes to continue hostilities against Signia, we will. Prince Kaizen leapt to his feet, and Dominic stood to meet him, placing himself between the princess and the Dagos prince. Your Highness, if you value your good health, I recommend that you return to your dinner. Dominic insisted. The room was full of hushed murmurs as the Signia advisor openly insulted and threatened one of the leading candidates for next king of Dagos. I'm of half a mind to, the prince began. And if you were of more than half a mind, you would be sitting right now. Dominic retorted. 2 noblemen came running from another table and grabbed the prince by the shoulders to lead him out of the room before he could say anything that he couldn't take back. My apologies for the interruption. Please, continue your dinner conversations. Dominic informed the room with a polite nod. Then he returned to his seat, where the Dagos generals sat silently, trying to decide just how serious the Dragonkin was about his challenge. In their minds, there had still been a real chance that the prince would win the popular support of the majority of the Dagos nobles and the throne. But with today's humiliation, many would turn on him. Followed by the revelation that Signia had huge amounts of artillery around the city, waiting to deploy, and it was becoming clear to even the most patriotic of generals that the war was already lost. The coronation was a mere formality to decide what the next generation looked like. General Widgeon sighed. The prince has always had a short temper, a keen mind, but the moment that he gets upset, that all goes out the window. Dominic nodded. He drew a blade in the Signia throne room as well. Only the king's mercy let him leave alive, but it seems he took that as a sign that he could do anything that he wanted. Both generals shook their heads in dismay. The prince had built a lot of support over the years, but now he was cracking under pressure. If they were going to make him king to keep the army in control of the nation, they were going to have to bring him back in line. Chapter 194. Meet the Generals. The main course came out, and the table ate in silence for a few minutes as the rest of the room buzzed with anxious conversation. So, what is Widgeon like? It's a large city, isn't it? Dominic asked, trying to salvage the conversation. General Widgeon nodded. 250,000 now, with a fishing fleet of nearly 5,000 ships. We're leaders in Magitech shipbuilding as well. The whole city has been changing ever since the new steam-assisted ships were introduced. Keeping enough coal on board to drive the boiler has been difficult, but Dagos doesn't have the number of mages that Signia or Bastaviria do. General Modberry nodded. We had recently changed from building conventional ships to building airships in my hometown, though it is currently under siege. The adaptation to new designs and technologies has been a real boon for industry. Tell me, how does Signia handle the shortage of copper? Princess Alexis sighed. Not well, I'm afraid. We've instituted large recycling programs, developed new mining tools to extend the lives of the few copper mines that we have, and we have been working on trade deals to import more. General Widgeon tapped at the table. If the situation was different, I would offer to have our merchant fleet bring you more copper, for a moderate commission, of course. However, with the battle of the two heirs, I don't see a way that the struggle for the throne is going to end with anything resembling normal trade relations. Dominic shrugged. Well, I suppose if things get bad enough, another option can be found. You never know where there might be another Dago's royal hiding in plain sight. But I do have some hope for the Viscount. He has proven to be a pragmatic leader in the past. Not like some who would throw their entire army away for a slim hope of victory. That clear dig at Prince Kaizen didn't go unmissed by any of the nobles who were listening carefully from the nearby tables. Those who were familiar with the lineage knew that the Signia Crown Prince's wife was a princess, but accepting him as their monarch would be a last resort, and only after a civil war. However, Advisor Dominic's words suggested that there was another royal alive that they had all forgotten about. Or perhaps they had been lied to. If one of the other princes was still alive, it would throw the whole succession into chaos. They didn't know it yet, but there were actually two of them still alive, and willing to support Signia's crown Prince Claudius for the throne of Dagos if it became necessary. They had no intention of taking over where their grandfather had left off, but they also weren't willing to support Kaizen. While the Dagos generals and advisors were unaware that the two princes were alive, Dominic was unaware that Kaizen had told everyone that they were dead so that he could recruit support for his faction. If support was split 4 ways, Viscount Boscom would be forced onto the throne, whether he wanted it or not. Prince Kaizen looked like he was ready to explode as he returned to his seat. But when the servers brought the next course, his glare turned to a smirk. Like that wasn't suspicious at all. The servers weren't wearing the same white gloves as the rest of the staff. The ones that they had on looked like some sort of magitech, and when they put down the plates, they immediately retreated. General Modbury instantly rose to his feet. Seriously? Twice in one night? Are you trying to start the siege of Albroles tonight with your idiocy? I, General Modbury, heir to the Dukedom of Modbury, hereby demand that Prince Kaizen be removed from consideration for the throne and stripped of all noble status for the attempted murder of visiting dignitaries. The prince leapt to his feet, about to speak, and the sound of blades being drawn filled the room. Attack! The prince declared. The staff and guards began attacking indiscriminately, aiming for every noble in the room. The generals all drew weapons and moved to surround the princess and their wives in a defensive formation. So Dominic crossed his fingers for luck as he cast mage armor on the 3 of them. With a thought, Arcane Blast took out a guard as he charged for the generals. But when Dominic turned to where Prince Kaizen should be, the man was gone. Not moved off to attack someone, simply vanished. Mimic spell. He was never really here, Viscount Boscom shouted. His blade was in his hand, and covered in clay, as he must have stabbed the fake Prince Kaizen in the back. More soldiers were pouring into the dining room as the guests drew weapons from their storage items and tried to fight back. Now we know why that bastard was so smug. The coward abandoned his people to have mercenaries do his dirty work. Someone from the prince's table shouted. Everyone retreat to defensive formations. Center of the room. Prince Alex called. The nobles who couldn't fight immediately retreated, and Prince Alex raised a defensive barrier over them. That would prevent hidden archers from targeting them. But going by the number of soldiers entering the room, Dominic didn't think that subtlety was the order of the day. Princess, please retreat to safety with the generals' wives. Dominic requested. Alexis was going to argue, but she didn't have any of her spell gems on or armor. By the time that she was equipped for battle, the fight would be over. But Dominic didn't suffer from that limitation, and he hurled a fireball at the main doors of the Great Hall, scorching dozens of soldiers. He smacked a mortar round on his horn, lighting the fuse, then threw it at the upper balcony, where more mercenaries were entering, and then frowned as the blast shattered all the stained glass windows in the room. That was a powerful detonation in an enclosed space. He would have to remember that for later. Arcane Blast rescued a downed nobleman from Chip, and then one of the princesses from Bastaviria who had been separated from her family. The second prince was casting some sort of grand magic from the center of the room, but Dominic ignored it as he continued to target every mercenary, traitor staff member and hostile guard in the room. It looked like they had started the attack by assassinating the guards arranged along the walls by the other nation's nobles, and there wasn't much resistance, other than a few well-trained swordsmen like the generals. Then, the second prince's magic washed over the room in a wave, and every one of the intruders collapsed, bleeding from the eyes and nose. Chapter 195, Head Count. Your Highness, Dominic called. I'm good. Viscount Boscombe is safe. Alexis replied. There were bodies all over the room, and far too many of them in finery. The murder of dozens of foreign royals and higher nobles would not go over well, and Dominic didn't know what was going to happen now. Would they place the blame all on Prince Kaizen? Would they join the war against Dagos? Realistically, the majority of the country didn't have anything worth taking, and it would cost them more than they would get back. But would any of them be willing to support Viscount Boscombe? If he couldn't provide effective security for formal events, could he be trusted as a monarch? But there might be more happening in the city than they knew about. Princess Alexis moved between the bodies, healing those who were still breathing, as did a few other noble ladies who had chosen the path of a priestess. It didn't appear that there were any other paladins in the room, but they were uncommon outside Signia. Haggard-looking royal guards ran in a few minutes later, both survivors of the detachments sent by other nations, and the Dagos royal guard members who had been stationed elsewhere in the castle. General, the threat appears to be neutralized. There is no sign of Kaizen in his quarters, or anywhere else in the palace. However, the Signia army has sent a cavalry regiment into the city. A guard general announced. Prince Alex frowned and shook his head. There hasn't been any action within the city, and nobody has attempted to leave. If he was in the palace, he should still be here somewhere. The Viscount and the new Duke Albroles shared a grim look. I think that I know where he has gone. Beneath us, there is an ancient dungeon and escape tunnel system, in case the city and the palace were besieged. The Duke has already dispatched soldiers to the exit, and we will send another to hunt him down from this side. Viscount Boscombe declared. The second prince nodded. I will join the team. Prince Nathan of Chip will join me, as he is also an accomplished battle mage. Even if the coward has a small army with him, we will take care of it. Now lead the way, there is no time to waste. Sister, stay here with the others. I won't be long. The young Duke of Albroles led the two mages out of the room, and a group of his guards formed behind them, running through the halls. Viscount Boscombe gave the princess a tired smile and ran a hand through his graying hair. I thought that he was seriously going to contend for the throne, not attempt to murder everyone who might support me instead. But I do believe that we can take this as a sign of his abdication, and move ahead with the coronation ceremony. The sooner that we can do it, and get the other nations to recognize it, the better. He decided. Dominic nodded in understanding, but the princess frowned. The prince's actions were like a small child throwing a tantrum. He had realized that he couldn't have the throne, and now he was trying to burn everything to the ground so that nobody else could have it either. That was not the logic of someone who was considered a contender for the throne, even as a puppet king. There might be another party involved, making him look worse than he was. Alexis addressed the Viscount in a quiet tone. I think that might not be as easy as you hoped, with the number of dead here today. We all know what happened, but how many of the monarchs sitting at home are going to believe the official story when you have to tell them that their children and senior nobles were killed at the first dinner of the succession gathering? Until Prince Kaizen is found and publicly shamed into a confession, your position is shaky. Worse, I am not certain that even my father will believe the official reports. If he doesn't, then the ceasefire is going to end in the most violent way possible, and those nobles who are gathered here to support you will likely be forced home to defend their cities. Boscombe nodded stiffly. You have a good point, Princess. I should be working on assuring everyone that we're working to assure their safety. However, with most of the army under the control of Prince Kaizen, that might not be easily done. He was about to turn away when a thought came to him. Might we hire your natural son's regiment for security, Princess Alexis? As the sons of noblemen, they may be familiar faces to the guests, and at the very least, their loyalties will not be in question. Alexis took a moment to consider the wisdom of that, then nodded. I will make an announcement to the room now, and then call for the regiment to come inside the palace and secure the area while Dagos works to identify the rest of the assassins. After all, they were already on their way in, and her communication gem was flashing constantly as the drivers sent messages to the regiment, who were already in the city. The head table, which had been left empty for the dinner as no monarch was chosen yet, was on a raised stage at the front of the room, putting the king and his invited guests above the rest of the nobles, in both a literal and a metaphorical sense. Normally, the duke would dine there, but in this situation, it had been deemed best not to, as he had no aspirations to the throne. Dominic led Princess Alexis to the stage, then whistled to stop all the nervous chatter. Princess Alexis curtsied politely and addressed the nobles. After today's incident, the heir apparent to the throne of Dagos has requested the assistance of Signia to ensure the safety of his guests. For this purpose, the 500 soldiers of the Natural Sons Regiment will be entering the city to secure the palace. They will not be interfering in the political affairs of Dagos beyond security measures. But those who have lost their security retinue may request a personal guard from the Natural Sons. Rest assured, every man in the regiment is noble-born, suitable to the role as a personal guard even for royalty. We do not wish to fully occupy the city at this time, so the majority of the army will remain on station outside the city limits. I will personally assist with the funeral arrangements for those who fell here today, as I travel with a number of spare storage devices, so bodies may be preserved if funeral rites will be performed at home. Prince Nathan of Chip and Prince Alex of Signia are hunting the coward prince who orchestrated the attacks today, and it is Signia's wish that everyone considers staying while the succession of Dagos is sorted. Questionable legitimacy of the Dagos king is not in our interest, she explained. Chapter 196. Unclear Path Forward. The nobles were unsure of their path forward, but the Signia princess had saved many lives after the battle. If she had a full regiment of noblemen to secure the Albrol's palace, it would be seen as a capitulation by the Dagos throne. But most considered the war to be lost already, and the succession to be a concession by Signia to avoid angering their other neighbors with an attempt to expand their own holdings by too much. A man in white robes joined them on the stage. Who do we have here that can use mana at the level 15 or higher flow rate? There is an archpriest in the city, and he has just arrived to perform a revitalization ritual. It's not quite resurrection, but if there is any chance of saving a life, he will be able to heal them with enough mana. Princess Alexis nodded and gestured to Dominic. Both of us are capable. The second prince is as well, but he is indisposed at the moment, hunting the perpetrator of today's attack. A few other nobles came forward, including all of the Bastaviria royals. This will have to do. Generally, revitalization will work within 30 minutes of death, but it takes a massive amount of mana to restart their bodily functions, and there are no guarantees, especially if the body is too damaged. The priest explained. Everyone in the room already knew that, but it was good to hear it so they didn't get their hopes too high. The priest came running into the room with a dozen other elderly clergy members, and then motioned for tables to be moved. The ritual requires a spell circle on the ground. Do any of you speak the ancient mystic languages? I don't have my usual proofreader with me. The old man wheezed, trying to catch his breath. I can read and write most of the ancient runic languages, Elder. Go ahead and work. I will check the runes and grammar for you. Dominic insisted. The priest looked dubious, but when Dominic took off his hat, the old man smiled and nodded. The priest began drawing the magical circle, while Dominic watched and whispered a few changes to him to make the spell more efficient on a large group. They only wanted to target the ones who were still in this room, which was easy. They just needed to remove the bodies of the mercenaries so they didn't revive enemies in the process. Are we ready? The elderly priest asked as he finished drawing the circle. We have removed the attackers. The recently deceased are bandaged as well as possible to make the spell easier. His assistant informed him. All right, everyone, pass me mana, and I will begin the spell. All of the magically adept nobles began to send mana to the priest, and the spell circle glowed bright white, a light that spread across the room. The priest was panting with exertion, but the spell was still getting stronger. Sorcerer, put as much mana as you can directly into the spell. It is stable enough now, he mumbled, struggling to hold the spell together. Dominic changed his focus to pulling as much mana as he could from the palace and feeding it to the spell circle. The white light went from bright to blinding, and then so bright that Dominic could see the veins in his eyelids after he shut them against the light. Then, the bones in his hand when he covered his eyes instead. Then, the light abruptly faded, leaving them all temporarily blinded. It worked, Princess Alexis declared, and Dominic wondered how she knew that. He couldn't see anything. As his vision cleared, he saw that the same was true of nearly everyone else. But the princess had pressed a folded piece of leather over her eyes, dimming the light enough that when it faded she wasn't totally blind. Not all of the nobles were moving, but most of the deceased were beginning to move, and over half of the guards who had been the first casualties. That was better than Dominic had expected. He hadn't seen many high-leveled clerics in action, but this one certainly had lived up to every hope that an outsider could have for them. In theory, resurrection was also possible, but it was more akin to necromancy, and you never knew if you'd get the person back intact, or as some sort of soulless undead. Revitalization didn't have that problem. The fallen noble's friends and relatives swarmed to them, ensuring that they were properly healed, and not likely to die again in a few minutes. But the spell had done its job properly, and no open wounds were found on the living. Well, at least we won't be sending dozens of condolence letters back to every king we share a border with. Dominic heard the Albrol's Duke's chief advisor mutter. That was one way of looking at it. But also, having them all alive to tell the story of how Prince Kaisan's mercenaries turned on them would go a long way to quelling the rage of the foreign royals over this incident. What would really matter is whether the prince could be captured alive, and how Viscount Boscombe handled things in the next few days while they rushed his coronation ceremony. Thank you, High Priest. You saved so many of our people. One of the Bostevirian princesses cried, hanging off the old man's sleeve. The old man looked at Dominic, intending to place the blame on him, but the sorcerer was looking away with his arm around the Princess of Signia. That route was out. You're welcome, Princess, but it's no more than my duty, and every magic user in the room assisted. He replied instead, but you're the only one who knows the ancient language and the healing spell. Without you, none of this would be possible. Surely, there is some reward that we can offer you, she pleaded. Princess, my order takes vows of both poverty and chastity. There really aren't any worldly desires that will tempt us. The high priest assured her, while the nearby nobles tried not to laugh. She had not meant it in a physical way at all. She was just so used to flirting with potential suitors that she did it unconsciously. Chapter 197. Search the Palace. Deep beneath the Albrol's palace, Prince Alex and Prince Nathan of Chip moved carefully through a dim corridor. They had reached the deepest level of the dungeons, and soon they would be headed for the emergency exit tunnel that would lead out of the city in case of siege. It was assumed that the prince knew of the location and how to access it, but so far, neither mage had found any signs of recent usage, nor any sign of the prince's presence in the palace at all. It was possible that they were chasing a ghost, and that the duplicate that Viscount Boscombe had destroyed was the only version of Prince Kaisan that had ever been in the Albrol's palace. Which brought up one very serious question. Where was the real Prince Kaisan, and who had created the duplicate of him? Because that was well beyond the magical abilities of the Dago's royal line. The pair of princes searched every corner of the palace, even going room to room using a finding spell, in case Kaisan was trying to hide from them. But they didn't find anything except a group of terrified servants and one confused advisor. He had, understandably, skipped the dinner where his prince was planning to assassinate everyone who would stand against his bid to become king. But even under intense questioning, he gave no signs that he knew that the Prince Kaisan here was a fake. In the Great Hall, everyone was on edge, and they were all waiting for the two princes to return or send word of their findings. The level of trust was too low for them to approve sending out any more groups who might alert more traitors or pass messages to forces hiding in the city. The feast was reluctantly continued once the tables were reset, but more out of the necessity of eating something than any desire to actually continue with the day's planned schedule. Prince Alex led the investigation group back into the hall hours later, long after dark. Half the nobles were already asleep in their chairs or leaning against walls, but everyone had remained where they were, save for the staff who disposed of the bodies. And the kitchen staff who still looked absolutely terrified. They weren't stupid. Half of the staff hired for the event had joined the attack launched by Prince Kaizen, and the other half would be lucky to leave with their lives. Even leaving with all their limbs mostly intact would be considered a win. Princess Alexis slowly chewed a puff pastry with a contemplative look on her face. Do you think that the version of Prince Kaizen who was insignia was the same duplicate? It would explain why he wasn't afraid of death. He may have been taunting us, pushing his luck to see if anyone realized that it was a body double. She pondered. Dominic and the generals frowned. That's not impossible. The spell links the fake to the real version so it can react properly. But it knows that it is not the real person. Given his twisted personality, I can see a fake Kaizen doing something like that. General Widgeon agreed. Then the question becomes whether the real prince knows everything that the double has done. And if so, how did he plan to make that work in his favor? Dominic wondered. Or if he's the one making the plans at all. General Modberry added. That was a disturbing possibility. The real prince may be in captivity somewhere, with his double sent out to cause trouble and destabilize two nations at the same time. But until they could find the real prince, or the mage who created the double, they couldn't prove any of their theories. The princes finished speaking to a few other royals. Then Prince Alex came to the table to collect his sister. Alexis, we should retire to our suite for the evening. Nothing else will get done tonight, but we will need to be sharp in the morning. The regiment has just finished securing the palace, and the commander will be waiting at our suite for a briefing on his duties. He explained. Dominic helped the princess to her feet, and Alexis smiled at her brother. All right, let's get this all over with. Now that the natural sons are in place, there is less to worry about. They're armed heavily enough for anything short of a full paratrooper invasion of the city. Technically, they were armed to deal with that as well, Dominic knew. But hitting moving targets from that great of a distance was pushing the limits of the rifles. He really did have to revise the plans to create a reliable sniper rifle of some sort, preferably with a longer range than what any of the other nations could achieve with artillery. That might not be practical simply because of ballistics, but where ballistics failed them, magic might be able to step in. Dominic just didn't know exactly how to accomplish that. You've got a faraway look in your eyes, like you're planning a war crime, Prince Alex joked. Dominic shrugged. I was working on mental plans for how to alter the regiment's Magitech rifles into something with enough range and accuracy to snipe artillery before it can get in range to fire. The Dago's generals shared concerned looks at that revelation. The world was a better place without that particular invention. What sort of demonic sorcery would allow a rifle to fire further than artillery? Surely that wasn't something that could be done? It was. But mostly it was accomplished with a collection of Magitech orbs and spell gems, not a single device. Already, Commander Dax had a confirmed kill from over a kilometer away, even though it had taken him multiple shots. With some improvement, it wasn't unrealistic to at least hit a stationary vehicle from over a kilometer away every time. From there, refinements could be made to narrow the target to the size of a human. Not that either of those things would have helped them today. Chapter 198. Regimental Duties. Prince Alex led them back to their suite, where Commander Dax was waiting, along with his adjutant and 2 runners from the regiment. Your Highnesses, advisor, what are your orders? Commander Dax greeted them. First, what is going on in the city? Has there been any sign of a troop buildup? Any mass movement of citizens that might indicate trouble? Prince Alex asked. That's the tricky part, you see. The people are expecting that there is going to be a new king any day now, so they're congregating around the palace, waiting for the official announcement. Everyone knows that the candidates are here and not at one of the other royal palaces, so this is the spot to find out first. They're not going to easily give up on the best spots to wait for the announcements, and they've crowded some of the streets so badly that the merchants are having a tough time getting to work. Fortunately, the windows that were blown out all face internal courtyards, and weren't visible to any of the civilians outside the palace. Dax explained. The prince sighed and shook his head. Of course they are gathered here. Why didn't I think of that? Well, to update your end, Prince Kaizen was a magical double and we don't know who made it. It's extremely complex ritual magic, so that narrows down the number of people who could have possibly assisted him. We also know that the real Kaizen is still alive somewhere. If he had died, the spell would have ended. Now, how is the regiment armed? Commander Dax rubbed at the back of his neck nervously. Well, you see, we're fairly well stocked. We've got a rifle and a mana revolver, a shoulder-fired mortar launcher with 20 rounds, and an uncommon grade sword for every man. Every 10th man has a ground-fired mortar for artillery emplacements, but the rounds are interchangeable between launchers, so we can overstock them from the rest of the unit if we're in a siege. Advisor Dominic, myself, and 2 team leaders have the Magitech orbs to make more mortar rounds. We have enough food supplies for 4 months, and water creation orbs. The rum stock is low, as we were using it to make friends among the locals for information gathering. Other than that, we've got no damages among the mechanical horses, and all transport trucks, including the passenger transport, are in operational condition. All are magic-driven, so no concerns on fuel range. Dax explained. The prince nodded. Then once the commander was finished, he turned to Dominic. And when exactly did you find time to make mortar launchers? The first night after we left Signia City. They're brilliant. We didn't have any cannons with us, but we wanted something with more crowd suppression ability than the rifles. The first test was a resounding success, and then the lads suggested it might be nice to be able to fire mortars while on the move. If we had real horses, they would have never adapted to the new tactic, but with everyone on mechanical steeds, it has proven exceptionally effective as a ride-by-strike. Like horse archers, but explosive. Dominic explained. I will get you to make me one later. The important part for now is that the city is likely to come under attack in the next few days, and we don't know whether the attack is coming from inside or outside the city. If it's outside, the armies can take care of it. If it's from inside, we will need the natural sons to be at peak form. There is a chance that with the initial plan failed, Prince Kaizen and his backers are going to make another attempt to assassinate Viscount Boscom before he can be crowned. I will push for the timeline to be accelerated, but some preparations will be needed. At best, we're looking at the day after tomorrow. Prince Alex explained. Commander Dax nodded. All right, we can handle that. Then, once there is a crown on his head, what comes next? Alexis gave a grim chuckle. That's when the real danger starts. Once there is a king to deal with, we need to work out either an end to the war, terms of surrender by Dagos, or the full invasion of the remaining free cities. The commander frowned, and the other soldiers shrugged. Most of that wasn't their problem, unless it came to a battle within the city. The political machinations would be done by the senior nobles, not untitled soldiers like them. Though this gathering was particularly lucrative. There were more Dagos noble families scheduled to arrive soon, and they might have daughters with them. The natural sons were mostly unmarried, as a married man didn't volunteer to join the front lines of a war. The ladies might be from an enemy nation now, but that could soon change. Prince Alex cleared his throat. All right, I have a deployment order for you. I managed to obtain a more complete map of the palace, and the regiment will be sending soldiers to accompany the foreign nobles who lost too many guards. Your regiment will be everywhere within the palace by tomorrow night. Make copies of the map for the unit so that they all know where to go if there is an alarm call. We've got multiple requests already, and the palace guard, or what is left of them, will be sending the rest of the requests to you directly. Commander Dax smiled. All right, I will take care of it. You do whatever it is that royals do at these sorts of functions. Hunt traitors, pretend that I actually like the royal brats from the other nations. Wait for the next idiot to try to assassinate me. Keep my sister from getting drunk enough to be taken advantage of. Prince Alex agreed. The other officers chuckled, and Commander Dax shrugged. I don't think that you have to worry about that. If someone wants to get to her, they have to get past both you and Advisor Dominic. And then they can deal with the princess herself. Let me tell you, if the royal guardsmen are to be trusted, she only gets more violent when drunk." Princess Alexis smirked, and her brother rolled his eyes. The commander wasn't wrong. She had a habit of getting into bar fights when patrons at the tavern the guard frequented didn't recognize her and got a bit too handsy. Chapter 199. Occupation. The commander led the men out to deploy the soldiers, while Prince Alex poured a round of drinks. "We're going to need this, and then you should get a good night's sleep. I will be up all night dealing with military deployment orders, so you two can take care of the polite politics tomorrow morning," the prince instructed. "Are you not calling your advisor up?" Dominic asked. Prince Alex shook his head. "He is watching over the 2nd Regiment for me, and he's got a communication device to send me messages about what happens outside the city. It's critical that he remains where he is." Alexis and Dominic finished their drinks. Then the princess dragged him to his feet as Prince Alex cleared his throat. "There are servants here, sister. They can help you prepare for bed." Alexis sighed, then motioned for one of the blushing and quietly giggling maids to join her. "You two are going to give my father a heart attack when he reads the reports. You know that, don't you?" Prince Alex sighed. His hair was tousled from running his fingers through it, and dark bags were already beginning to form under his eyes. The events of the day hadn't been easy on him, but he was planning to stay up all night to sort out the military deployments anyhow. "It's not our intention. We just got into the habit as we were traveling, and it's become routine," Dominic replied. "Sit and drink. The maids will gossip enough already. Since we have a bit of time, we should discuss a few important matters about your courtship." Alex insisted. "Miss, we will need the good stuff for this. Perhaps a nice cognac." Dominic instructed the maid as he sat across from the prince. "There are a few things that are unclear about your childhood. You were raised by an arcanist and a technomage, right? One of them being the younger sibling of the Earl Westover." Prince Alex asked. Dominic nodded. "They preferred peace and quiet, so we didn't live in the manor, but a few kilometers out in the woods." The prince pursed his lips and frowned. "How sure are you that they're your real parents?" Dominic shrugged. "As sure as any child would be. I lived in that house for as long as I can remember. We went to visit the manor once or twice a week, but there weren't any other children my exact age there. The closest was a season off. Most children in the village were born in the autumn, you see, the result of long nights spent indoors during the heavy rains of winter." Prince Alex nodded. "The reason I ask is right there on your head. I managed to dig up pictures of the Earl's family from just after he moved to Westover Manor. He was good friends with the Baron Westover from the Signia side of the border, you see, and none of the rest of the family had such prominent draconic lineage. Not even the Earl's sister, the Dragon King's exiled former concubine. She would have arrived in the manor 6 months before you were born." The prince paused there, and Dominic silently considered the implications. The Earl's sister was exiled in disgrace for reasons that were never openly stated around children. But Prince Alex was right. Though most of the family and the villagers were dragonkin, horns were rare. At most, it usually manifested in the pupil shape, sometimes the fingernails growing as claws. And the magical affinity, of course. But Dominic had all those traits and more. But his parents were his parents, no matter what the truth was. However, if his lineage pointed more directly toward the Dragon King, there could be ramifications far beyond his magical abilities. Dagos and their allies had gone to great extents to eliminate the Dragon King's entire direct lineage. Letting a surviving member marry into the Signia royal family would surely upset those who had a particular grudge against the deceased king. Dominic nodded slowly as he considered his answer. "Yes, she arrived half a year before I was born. However, I am told that exiled concubines are given a potion to ensure that they are not pregnant when they are exiled. Even if her child were fostered out to someone in the village, or another family member, it would be incredibly difficult to convince others of that fact." Prince Alex shook his head. "And I wouldn't want to. My concern is that if your lineage led a bit more directly to the dragons than others thought, we might end up with a new young dragon king looking to claim his throne in the next generation. What do you know about your father? Where was he born? What was his father like?" I have no records on his side of the family, unlike your mother's. Dominic shrugged. He was a technomage, and I am told that he was traveling when he met my mother at the market selling her magical wares. If you left them alone, they would discuss nothing but magical devices in the sort of intensely flirtatious way that makes young children leave the room in disgust. Prince Alex laughed so hard that tears formed in his eyes. Did this man honestly not see that he did the same thing with Princess Alexis? Going by the innocent look on his face, he really might not have noticed how intimate their conversations had gotten. Just the fact that she was physically touching him as she read was enough to scandalize half the court. If they knew she napped in his lap alone, the king himself would hold the shotgun for the next morning's forced wedding. That was why he hadn't said anything. Prince Claudius surely suspected at least a little of what was going on, though. What Prince Alex actually said did not give away any of his thoughts on the matter. All right, then it is possible that your father had the greater draconic lineage. There are more than a few wild sorcerers and demi-humans who are more beast or monster than human. Your father was well respected for his work. I have the records from the border barons on the matter to confirm it. Some of his devices remain in the treasuries of Signia nobles to this day. Now, back to my original point. I think that we should hold a foreign wedding in the next few days so that we can assign titles and estates to you both as part of whatever settlement we come to. If we do it after, it will be problematic. Alex insisted. Dominic winked at him. I'm not going to be the one to tell the princess. That's all on you. Chapter 200. But will she agree? Prince Alex shrugged, unconcerned. I think that she will take it better than you're expecting. Just the fact that it will be over and done with, and she will get her first choice without any royal arguments should be enough. That was a solid argument. Princess Alexis hadn't been in any hurry to get married in the first place. But Dominic was more concerned that she might start a rebellion if her sister was forced into a political marriage in her place. Or worse, that she really did have the vision of a perfect wedding in her mind, and had simply refused to tell anyone about it so they could prepare. The maid brought out a bottle of fine cognac, and popped the cap to let it breathe for a moment before pouring. Oh, that is good. I don't know that I'll be able to go back to soldier rum after that. Dominic sighed as he sipped the strong liquor. I don't know how you drink that stuff in the first place. The only thing worse is the gin that they make. That stuff is just vile. Prince Alex replied, disgusted by the thought. Nearly as vile as pineapple. Alexis agreed as she walked out of her room with her hair down and wearing a dressing robe over her nightgown. She walked over to the table and Dominic poured her a shot. The maid looked scandalized at the thought of a princess drinking hard liquor like a soldier. Even the maids didn't touch such things, much preferring wine. Have you two finished discussing my future without me? She asked, then sighed as she sipped the cognac. Almost. We would have gone into more details, but he is to be my brother-in-law, and some things wouldn't be appropriate. Dominic agreed. You two are incorrigible. Now, did he insist on an immediate wedding, or hedge around the topic? Alexis demanded, facing Dominic. The prince sighed. You know that I wouldn't do that. However, you would strongly encourage that it is done before the war ends? Princess Alexis guessed. See, no need to get upset. We're both thinking the same thing. Don't you mean all three of us? She retorted. No, just the two of us. What advisor Dominic is thinking definitely isn't suitable for polite company. But we did get a chance to chat a little about his lineage. Nothing definitive, but enough to confirm that none will contest his right to noble title. Prince Alex clarified. Dominic winked at the princess, who blushed, then stuck her tongue out at him and downed the rest of her drink so she could pour herself another, this time with an ice cube. At least the preparations will be easy. Dominic heard one of the noble son's guards at the door mutter to himself. How is that? Dominic asked. Well, she's a princess and a paladin of the order. The formal wedding ceremony is detailed down to the last movement. All we need to do is bring in the right people, and it can be prepared in a matter of hours. They've mastered the routine by now, the officer explained. Right? Your father is also a royal paladin, isn't he? Princess Alexis asked. Yes, Your Highness. Currently deployed with the Crown Prince. Well, we shouldn't be short on witnesses. If we can get my royal guards here, we will have all the order members we need. Then we just need a priest and one more male royal. Princess Alexis pondered. Prince Alex laughed. You underestimate my powers of preparation, little sister. My royal guards were in the airship accompanying my ground troops. Plus, the other royal doesn't have to be a Signia royal. There are princes from West Kyria, Bastaviria and Chip here. If we want to hold the ceremony, we only need a few hours to get everyone in place. However, I am certain that more time is needed on your side, and we probably shouldn't cause a spectacle until things are a bit more settled. We wouldn't want to ruin your honeymoon with a civil war or succession battle. 400 kilometers northwest at the royal castle of Arenal, Prince Kaizen was in a rage. You said that it would work. What is this I'm hearing that not only did Viscount Boscombe survive, none of the titled foreign nobles attending his false coronation are dead either. Did I hire a mercenary army or a bunch of housewives bragging about their skill with a kitchen blade? He roared at the mercenary general kneeling in front of him. The man had been mercilessly whipped, with his back in tatters, and bleeding onto the floor. Your Majesty, we weren't aware that the Wavemates Prince and the Signia Second Prince were at the ball. Their magical abilities were too great for our men to overcome, and then they managed to have that decrepit old high priest cast a revivification ritual on the dead. The mercenary pleaded. Prince Kaizen scoffed, and turned to his loyal generals and nobles. Send out the messages. The new king of Dagos has taken the throne, and a coronation will be held here in 7 days. The traitor Viscount and his band of cowards at Albrols are to be executed on sight by any loyal son of Dagos. He demanded. Yes, Your Highness. Long live the king. His advisor agreed. Long live the king. The nobles in the room echoed. But there were no others there to hear them. The only ones who knew of this meeting were already in the room, and no foreign noble nor nation had shown any true loyalty to his body double in the time before the attack in Albrols. He had no use for cowards and traitors. Even if he had to rebuild the nation from the ground up, he could do it with just loyal citizens. Kaizen gestured harshly for the nobles to clear the room, then called his advisors forward. How are things in the north? Have we prepared the next phase in the plan? He asked, confident that they would return the answer he wanted. Yes, Your Majesty. The only nobles from north of Boscombe that are not with us are the Duke Modbury and General Widgeon. Those traitors are in Albrols, but Modbury is under siege by the Signia scum. They won't last long once the ceasefire ends. Kaizen gave a cruel smile. Excellent. Put the plan in motion. We don't want that bastard Boscombe alive by the time my coronation comes. And for the sake of your families, don't fail me again.